It started as a small family project. Rick Pushinsky, a photographer, asked his dad, Steven, to jot down the recipes for the meals they had enjoyed when Rick was growing up. Steven's signature dishes, the best-loved handmedowns and perennial favorites. Rick's plan was to photograph the plates and create an archive to be shared with family, friends and anyone else who had eaten at their table. Steven, an optometrist, is a foodie, a Jewish father with a kitchen habit, says Rick. Having learned to cook at an early age at the elbows of his mother and aunts, cooking was a passion and a prowess. Food is the focal point of every day in our family, says Rick, 41. My mom also loves to cook and it's impossible to leave my parents' house without having overeaten. If you visit, lunch becomes a thing. Dad will go out to 3 or 4 shops, bring stuff back, prepare it, and while we're eating it, he'll be talking about what we will have for dinner. And in between, he'll a food program when he cooks for anyone. They will ask for the recipe, which he will write down an email on. So my first idea was to make a little collection to hand out instead. For Steven, who is edging towards retirement, it was an excuse to spend more time in the kitchen, going over old dishes, timing and measuring, jotting things down. Once I started, it was a very odd sensation, like churning out memories, he says. Food and family meals are so evocative. The smell of certain dishes. A taste that takes you straight back. Every single recipe had some sort of anecdote attached, and I remember when, so I was writing feverishly. The result, Just Not Kosher, which has just been published by father and son, is a box set of 21 recipe cards, which comprise 7 each of starters, main meals and desserts, a week's worth of menus. The menus include a vegetarian meal, a fish dish, Italian, French and of course Middle European Jewish, where salt beef, chopped liver, potatoes and chicken feature heavily. Rick's grandma and granddad with his father, Steven, on a recipe card for salt beef and potato latkes. Some of the dishes have been handed down through generations, others have been inspired by family holidays or local restaurants long since closed. The cards are beauty finished in laminate, and Rick's crisp, abstract images are juxtaposed with old family photos. Each recipe comes with memories attached. In a market dominated by celebrity chefs and food fads, this is true home cooking served with nostalgia. Steven grew up in Manchester, where he has remained, but his great-grandparents were from Central Europe. Our family heritage was Lithuanian, Ukrainian, where the food was heavy, cholesterol-laden for cold weather, hard work and no heating, he says. Chicken, potatoes. You need your fat. You need your protein. You need your fuel. But it certainly wasn't traditional for a son or father to cook it. While Steven's father had a company selling domestic appliances, his mother stayed at home with Steven and his older brother. Steven's recipe for chicken soup. My father might have cut bread, but toast would have been a challenge too far, says Steven. My mom made a 2-course meal, sometimes a 3-course meal, every day of the week. My father was one of the fussiest eaters that ever lived. He talked about food a lot, but ate from a very limited repertoire, which my mother produced absolutely identically every single time with no reference to recipes. She always got it right. I don't remember any kitchen disaster, ever. Steven took to her work when he was still a young boy. A widowed aunt came back from America. She would be in the house a lot, he says. I can't say she got me enthusiastic, but she got me involved. I remember silly things, such as making hard-boiled eggs and mixing them up. Then, my natural greed took over. When Steven was 9, his mom needed surgery and was incapacitated for 6 weeks. Every Friday, my job would be to get the chicken soup on the go before school, he says. Chicken soup really is Jewish penicillin. This chicken soup recipe is in the collection. It had to be, says Rick. It's such a familiar taste. It's beautiful, delicious soup, but when my parents make this huge pot and freeze it, it is also used for stock, so the taste becomes this all-pervasive thing that's in practically everything savory that gets made at home. Other recipes, such as the Lakshenkugel, are at least 4 generations old. Grandma Rose handed it down and we still have it at family get-togethers, says Steven. Kugel is a generic word for pudding and describes a rather formless mass baked in a dish. This formless mass comprises mainly lakshen noodles, eggs, apples, jam, raisins and cinnamon. For Rick, now London-based and also a keen cook, the collection is a celebration of Jewish family life. Food is absolutely central, he says. It's the focus. If you go to a Jewish wedding, you'll sit at a table with 10 or 12 others, there will be 2 bottles of wine on the table and they won't be finished by the end of the night because everyone's just eating. If you have visitors, food is a big fuss, the welcome, the warmth and hospitality. It is also, he says, a source of constant bickering. It's too salty. No one will eat that. Why are you putting chili in it? Steven's other son, Rick's elder brother, Harry, once owned a restaurant in South Manchester and now works in wine. He and my parents all argue incessantly about food, says Rick. I try and stay out of it. There were lots of arguments putting this collection together, partly over methods and also what dishes to include. But it has been worth it. It's like suddenly having a sort of code for memory, a combination for traveling back to another time, says Rick. I made the egg and onion recipe to photograph it. It's something we used to have often as a snack. It's very simple, but I took a mouthful and it instantly transported me to my family and childhood. I went to a dealer-style restaurant for a meeting the other day and I was sorely disappointed by the food, he says. It wasn't a patch on the things I remember. I had chicken soup, matzo balls and a salt beef sandwich. You realize the specifics are important. I know the taste of the things Mom and Dad make, but without the exact measurements and instructions, I can't make them. Just not kosher as a means of sharing the pleasure. It may a bit grand, but it's sort of a wider form of hospitality, says Rick. It's not going to make money, but it would be great if we heard people were making the dishes and enjoying them too. Steven adds, and it would be nice if it gained a life of its own, so we could thinking about doing another week Just Not Kosher 21 recipes from a Jewish father with a kitchen habit week 1, justnotkosher.com.